quarantine times, I feel like I'm running around and trying to take care of so many things at once, even though it's usually often in my own home. Hi, how are things in Chicago? I just got back from Chicago. I feel bad that I couldn't meet up with you while I was in town.
Well, that's okay. We could catch up some other time now and do a follow-up interview. So it's fine. 2 interviews are better than 1.
Sure, it sounds wonderful.
Okay, Janet. So, what inspired you to pursue communications and poetry rather than computer science and engineering?
I had started off in school actually at Carl Sandburg High School, but I focused on computer science because I was really good at math and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And it seemed like a smart idea and a good moneymaker, blah, blah, blah. And as I had gotten off to school at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, I realized that there were a lot of issues out there that a lot of people weren't able to address. And I saw a lot of injustices and things in the world. And I found myself, even when I was in high school, I was doing portrait photography. I found myself writing and taking pictures to relieve any sort of stress of what I had seen around me. So I thought this computer stuff might not be the way that I should go. And so I looked around and I said, well, I seem to be writing a lot. I'll go into news editorial journalism because I'm always trying to get the story on people. So it seemed like a natural switch. And so I focused on graphic design and I ended up designing magazines, and that is what I still do to this day.
Well, you were very good at math, and were you able to apply mathematical principles to poetry, to writing, to communications, to what you love to do?
I don't know if it was mathematics so much, although I think that ascribes to me being much more logical than I think the average poet is. We talked briefly, I think in the past, about the fact that I ran a poetry open mic in Chicago at the Gallery Cabaret eventually, and I noticed because it was from 7 o'clock till 9 o'clock in the evening, and there was a music act that followed. And so we had to start on time. And guess what? Poet time, nobody would get there at 7. And so I would often start by, I will read things from new issues of the literary magazines that I run and things like that. And so maybe that's because I'm a little more logical. Oh, we've got a schedule. We have to stay on time with these things. And so I would start things and get things going and then start an open mic as soon as people would start showing up. So, and the other funny thing is when I was looking for creative outlets of what things to write, one time I decided, I think, science geek, I'm going to write a poem for every element in the periodic table. And so I actually did that, which was crazy. And it's finished before, I think in the recent years, they've gotten the element names for 115 through 118 now, but back when I did it, they didn't have names. And so I just said I will look for things that way and find things that are poetic even in science and try to mesh those two ideas together as well.
So did you create a poem for element 115 to 118?
Yep.
116 to 118.
Unum septium, unum octium, and that was about a Russian person that was trying to get the elements together to be able to find these things and had to get things from Berkeley and yeah, I wrote about these things. And in fact that one poem, which I'm not going to do here, I read like I have a Russian accent because, as you said, I'm a performance artist. I can't just can't read things off. And that's something I also noticed when I ran poetry mics in Chicago as well as in Austin, Texas. Now I'm doing a monthly one that is titled Poetic License, which is available as a Zoom meeting. So if anyone is interested, on the first Sunday of every month, you could still go. And I still get Chicagoans that will show up to the Zoom meeting for Poetic License too. But I noticed that back in Chicago when I would have features, people would come with a stack of papers and they wouldn't know what order to read. And I'm like, you had this, you knew this was coming. You couldn't plan what you were going to, I have my things scheduled out and figured out exactly and for the time allotments. And because I've done stuff so many times with trying to come up with music in the background or something that will just pull people in a little bit more, I would have a whole setup. And in fact, Charlie Newman, who I took the open mic over for that was in Chicago, called me the queen of multimedia and the czarina of multimedia because I would have video cameras going and I'd have, anything just to be able to try to give people something else to look at. So.
And how did you get your Russian accent to use?
I just guessed, I just extrapolated what I figured sounded appropriate, and it probably didn't, although people were impressed that I could keep it the entire poem. But but it was just, just something for performing the poem, so. And I was going to say, you had asked about what made me go into choosing the issue related, changing from math to that. And I actually had something that I had written something about it. If you'd like a poem that actually relates to that, I would love to share it. I've got a poem that is the Reaching the End edit of the poem Burn It In, which actually appeared in the CC&D, one of the magazines I run, volume 285, I think, that is called Black and White. But this poem, as I said, is called Burn It In. Once I was at a beach off the west coast of Florida with a friend on New Year's Eve, and I watched the waves crash as the yellow moon hung over the Gulf like a swaying lantern. My friend watched the scene and said, I need to look at this scene and memorize it, burn it into my brain, record it in my mind so I could call it up when I wanted to, so I could have it with me always. I, too, have my recorders. I burn these things into my brain. I burn these things onto pages. I pick and choose what needs to be said, what needs to be recorded. When I first went to college, I was studying to be a computer science engineer. I wanted to make a ton of money. I wanted to beat everyone else. Because burned in the back of my brain were the taunts of kids who were in cliques so that others could do the thinking for them. Because burned in my brain were all those evenings of the high school dances that I never went to. Because burned in my brain were all those people that I knew I was better than, who thought they were better than me. Well, yeah, I wanted to make a lot of money. I wanted to beat everyone else. But I hated what I was doing, and I hated what I saw around me. I hated all the pain that people put each other through. And all these memories just kept flooding me. So in my spare time, to keep me sane, to keep me alive, I wrote down the things I could not say. That is how I recorded things. Well, when I looked around me and saw friends raping my friends, I wrote. I burned into these nightmares with a pen. And yes, I have this recorded. I have all this recorded. What did you think I was doing when I was stuffing handwritten notes into my pockets or typing long hours into the night? I was sitting at a computer lab, slamming my hands, my fingers against that keyboard because there were too many atrocities in the world, too many injustices that I had witnessed, too many people who had wronged me, and I had a lot of work to do. There had to be a record of what you had done. Did you think your crimes would go unpunished? Did you think that I wouldn't remember? Well, you see, that's what I have my poems for, so there'll always be a record of what you've done. Yes, I have defiled many pages, as in your honor, you who swung your battle axe high above your head and thought that no one would remember in the end. Well, I made a point to remember. I've defiled many pages. And have you defiled many women? Is this what makes you a strong man? You, the man who rapes my friends, the man who rapes my sisters, the man who rapes me? You want to know why I do the things I do? I had to record these things. That is what kept me going. When people were dying, that's what kept me together. When my friends went off to war, that is what kept me together. And when my friends were raped and left for dead, that is what kept me together. And when no one bothered to notice this, or change this, or care about this, these writings kept me together. I need to record these things to remind myself of where I came from. I need to record these things to remind myself that there are things to value and things to hate. I need to record these things to remind myself that there are things worth fighting for, worth dying for. I need to record these things to remind myself that I am alive. There you go.
Wow, that's good. I know that you were an acquaintance rape counselor, so did you write this before or after your work?
That was written probably a few years after I was doing my work as an acquaintance rape workshop facilitator. I would hear stories from other people, and you hear them, and these stories become a part of you. I mean, you can't have it not. These things people are being able to be so personal with you, and after a while it feels like you're carrying the weight of so much, even if you're just listening to stories like this, when there's only so much that you can do in the means of helping people become strong for themselves and get on for themselves.
Were any of those experiences contained in your Scars 1997?
Scars 1997. It's funny that you bring up that poem. As you had heard me say, I run 2 literary magazines. One of them is CC&D Magazine. The other is Down in the Dirt, and they are both under the umbrella of Scars Publications, which is a prose poem that I wrote, and it sounds like such a great name, Scars Publication. It was something that I wrote back in '93 about how we have scars, emotional, physical, like when I fell and my parents said, "Did you crack the sidewalk?" Or when a family member yelled at me and you swore words for something that wasn't my fault, or when I scratched my chin, when I had the chicken pox, or any of these kind of things. And I think back in '97, which is just the year I happened to write that second poem, that's all that meant for Scars '97, was to also say that sometimes in that poem, I wear my scars like badges. I've had these things, and you can be traumatized by them. The scars can scar you. Or you can say, this is a part of what makes me who I am now. I think, and then this relates to the acquaintance rape idea, I guess, as well. When you go through something that terrible, it is terrible, it genuinely is, and you can say, I wish it didn't happen. But then again, you look at yourself afterward, and how you have grown and become stronger as a person because of the battles you've had to deal with, that sometimes getting rid of those elements could actually unravel who you actually are now as a person. And that although you would never want these bad things to happen, sometimes keeping in mind that the person that you are now, if you like who you are now, if me as a woman, feeling with the concepts of sexism in everyday society, being objectified still to this day. It's lovely. If you don't have those kind of bad things that might help make you stronger for it, you would not be able to deal with the things that you do now in the same way, which is a really strange way to say things, but it's the fact that scars can be something that you can also learn from and grow from. Humorous thing, I moved to Austin, Texas because of my husband's job, and he says to me jokingly when we moved back in 2015, he said, well, now that you moved here, the Cubs will probably win. And the next year they did. After over a century or whatever. And in fact, I was walking back after the rain delay, and I don't know if I could show off my knee here. I slid and fell, and I gouged my knee. And people are like, oh, you can get some sort of scar remover to get rid of that. And I think, well, A, I'm probably never going to be a knee model, and B, this is kind of a fun memory of like what happened when the Cubs actually won, and why feel bad about every single scar that you have. So there's an element to bringing Chicago back into scars, I guess. But I've written about scars since then, but that's the reason why I had the name for Scars Publications, and I've written a few things about scars because we all have them, and oftentimes that's what poets will do, is write about the scars that they've had to go through.
Did you get any recognition when you were a high school student at Carl Sandburg High School for poetry, etc.?
That's really kind of funny that I happened to go to Carl Sandburg High School, and I did write poetry then, but a lot of it rhymed, and I'm not that fond of what I was writing then. It wasn't something I would be that thrilled with, although I've got if you can see, it's a really tiny page here. I've got something from high school that is actually in one of my books called Contents Under Pressure, because, whatever, it might explode if you razzle me up too much. Contents Under Pressure. This short one is called Sometimes the Light. Sometimes the understanding travels into the realms of the unknown. All we can do is hope, search, dream, because we will never find. Sometimes the light is not enough. I wrote a little bit in high school, but it was as I was facing more and more issues of the day, or for dealing with a woman as they grow up into an adult, which was probably after leaving Carl Sandburg High School, where the more emotional stuff for me would come from. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And was there any significance to 1997 except for that was the year in which you wrote Scars 1997.
No, it was just happened to be the year for that one, but I was just trying to look through things and by the way, I have this WZRD sticker, which I don't know if people I still have it and I've kept it with me and I won't stick it on anything because I don't want to lose it. But I'm like, yay for WZRD, as old as that sticker is. That actually is the year, I think, when you talk about the idea, which we might get into later, about milestones or interesting things in your life. As an artist, as a graphic designer, I was doing really well in Chicago, and I decided in '97 to quit my job with all of the money that I had saved, keep my apartment that I've got there, and travel around the country by car, and I was able to pull that off. Things were, there may have been whatever little stresses of the day or whatever, but that's just a part of, getting older or growing up or dealing with new changes in life for that, I suppose. I'm just trying to think of what other things we'd like to talk about. So.
Well, how did your work as an acquaintance rape workshop facilitator affect your poetry? Was it like deeply?
It actually really did, because the journalist side of me for news education and news editorial journalism at the U of I, my writing is very journalistic and oftentimes could almost be brought into paragraphs. And so I would write about rape education and what people had gone through, or if I would see things with issues that they'd come up with. I was seriously looking, because you were interested in poems to sprinkle throughout this, and this was something that was right when I had started, I believe, a year or two right into working with acquaintance rape issues, that I wrote this piece that is titled The Room of the Rape, and it is in the first book that I ever wrote or published in From Scars Publications, called Hope Chest in the Attic. So this poem, I've never read this for anyone, so this is kind of weird. This is called The Room of the Rape. For almost 2 years, when I walked up those 9 steps, held onto the wooden railing whose finish was worn, I'd pass the first door on the right. My bedroom door was closed for 1 year, 10 months, and 7 days. I slept in the den across the hall. One morning I woke, I walked into the hall, and I looked at that door. I turned around, knowing I couldn't take it anymore. I walked into the den, folded up the bed back into the couch, and then walked into the hall, squarely facing the door to that room. The room in my house that I let him into. But when I woke up this morning, I told myself that wouldn't let him stop me today. I turned the handle of the door. I heard a snap. I slowly pushed the door open, slowing it down to hear the hinges creak. The shades from the small window in the corner were drawn, so I stepped into the parquet floor and turned on the light. I felt the walls jump back in fear, a fear of having to see the light again, then rush in on me in anger. I saw the bedsheets rustle, get kicked and tossed to the ground again. I tasted the sweat, and I wanted to spit, but I couldn't. Something told me that wasn't what I was supposed to do. My bedroom. I saw the fists reach out from the walls as the thought of the poster I drew of rebellion and rage that is tucked in the back of my closet. I felt the muscles tense behind my eyebrows. I pursed my lips. I swallowed the sweat. My bedroom. I felt the fist punching my stomach, grabbing my face, my arms, my hair, pulling my legs apart. I felt my head against the pillow again as I tried to just push my face into the salt and the sheets. I heard the screams I never made echo inside me in screams, the screams that haunted me. I closed my eyes from the pain and the light. My bedroom. I thought of the fist, the symbol of the communist work ethic to do what you're told, to disappear into society. I opened my eyes. The room was mine, the sheets on the floor, the stains on the bed, the smell of hell, and the photograph on the dresser. I looked at the picture and turned to one of him with his arms around me. I picked up the frame. ran my hand along the gilded edges. Flakes of paint fell to the floor. I opened the drawer of the dresser and I gently put it face down. I turned around, shutting off the light, and I slowly went out of my bedroom. Well, that's a weird one.
Yes.
But then again, that's what happens when you were like, how do these things affect you? And this was written, I think, right when I was doing the things at the beginning, and then I would continue. And I'd be well after school, and I wouldn't be doing these things anymore. And people who'd know me, hi, my wife has an issue, and I need to, and I'm like, okay. Here we go. And it would still go on, and I would still hear it. And so that continues to happen. And a lot of times now it just reverts to the concept of sexism and objectification and that kind of thing as well, and opportunities that are afforded to women versus all people.
So what happened to you caused you to become an acquaintance rape workshop facilitator?
Well, there are things that happen to us as individuals, whether we hear them for others or you hear of family issues with other people or have your own family issues. You can then translate that to very easily what other people are going through. So it's and by doing that, you end up, the more you hear about it, the more it also becomes a part of you, whether or not that has happened to you or not. So
you were nominated for the Pushcart Prize several times, and what small presses nominated you, and was it nominations for work such as this, acquaintance rape poetry?
I cannot remember what pieces were nominated, but I think in light of the fact that other people whom I've heard, when they say I've been nominated, they never bothered talking about the press that did that, so I would also not do the same. And I also don't have that information on me to be able to give to you right now anyway, but no, I've never seen anyone else discuss, oh, these people nominated me, so I'm going to, in light of what others have done, ascribe to that as well. So, and I don't have them written down here anyway, right here in my space. So,
yes.
But it's cool that that I have over the years had been on Dean's List at Carl Sandburg High School and at U of I, or that I was in National Honor Societies at Carl Sandburg, that kind of thing. That's all well and good. They are just stepping stones to helping you become what you are, is all I can say, instead of saying, oh, yay, I got this and I got that, that kind of thing. So it's just a stepping stone to help make you who you are. So that'd be my answer.
Wow. But how did you come to be published in books, magazines, and on the internet?
So many
over
times.
10,000 times for writing and over 17,800 times for artwork.
It's crazy. At the beginning, when I first started out on my own to publish stuff, I would send submissions, and these are back in snail mail days, because the internet was only being created at my school when I was graduating. But a lot of people were rejecting me for poems that are really good and later have been published a lot since. And so I would get snail mail magazines, and I would notice that the people that were rejecting me were the people that were being published in magazines. And I thought, I'm a designer, I can do this stuff. And so I decided to start my own. And when I started CC&D with Scars Publications, a couple of years went on, and poets like C. Ron McGirt from Kentucky, he was like, you've been publishing me so much, how can I pay you back? I'm like, I don't know, start your own magazine and start publishing me. And which he did, but he published other things as well. But I think the idea of becoming an editor of something sounds like, well, you must be somebody important or something. And it takes that as a level of gravity to you as a writer as well. And so then, as silly as that sounds, that actually made a huge difference just by saying that, oh yeah, I'm an editor of literary magazine and this and this. And they're like, oh, we'll take, and then magazines would be like, oh, we'll take all of these things of yours and would put them in all sorts of issues. Or somebody took a ton of my artwork and would set up things and do covers. Couple magazine, Art Life would have things, and I would have a ton of stuff in Art Life, although that's a shame that they don't exist anymore. But there would be places that would be welcome to take as much as they could oftentimes. There were a couple websites, which I don't list in those credits that you list, that were like, we'll just take all of your poems and put them in, ta-da. So it helps. It helps actually when you are actually in the industry, the publishing, magazine publishing, literary world in the first place. I think that is a huge stepping stone, because that's all I thought when I was like, look, I'm being rejected for poems that are good, and why? Oh, these are editors are being published. Maybe I should do that. And I did that in my spare time and loved it. CC&D magazine used to be monthly in a saddle stitched, and then it was 100 pages in brad stapled and huge, and eventually went to after a near fatal, I guess this would be another milestone, a near fatal car accident where 2 cars hit me while I was stopped in an intersection, and I was in a coma for 11 days. Had to relearn how to walk and talk and eat. I was then saying I have to make these things a bit more permanent instead of having these saddle stitch things, and I started using an American press from Lulu, and then I thought, well, let me find something that's more directly affiliated with Amazon, because now I can have people who are submitting poetry from the UK, from Spain, and people from Africa. I feel bad. I'm like, they're like, how do I get a copy? I'm like, I'm really sorry. I've got Amazon and we cover most countries. I apologize. It's not able to get to you. I can get to Australia, or but a lot of India as well. I get a lot of writers from India. But that was why I said I'm going to make that something bigger than just my saddle stitch things for when I'm no longer here.
So what you're saying is that after you started publishing, creating your own press, and then people came calling in asking for your past work.
Yes, which is really funny because, yeah, I remember one of the poems, which is, I'm not going to say it because I've read it too many times. It's called The Burning, a really short poem of mine. It's a good poem, and nobody was accepting it. And then after I was running a magazine for a year or two, everyone and their brother wanted it, and and so it's I think it's the thoughts of the editors as they're reading stuff. As for me, I take people who send writing from prison, or for it doesn't matter to me where it comes from. I don't think of things that way. If the writing is good, the writing is good, and I'm sure that's what others would say as well. But I seem to notice only a change once I actually started editing a magazine myself.
So now that you are editing your own magazine, you're giving more opportunities to others and are not...
that don't have the opportunity.
Yes. You're not treating others as the others treated you.
No, definitely not. But I don't know. I can't define how others treated me. So I really can't make that statement, because they might have just been like looking and just rejecting stuff because they didn't know who I was. They could have been something that simple. I can't speak to why it wasn't. I can't say that, oh, they treated me poorly because I wasn't an editor. That sounds silly. So I'm sure that's not the case, but I feel like I work a lot to get these magazines out monthly. And then every once in a while people are like, yeah, you do need a vacation. And I'm like, yeah, I've been like doing a full-time job and I don't get paid for it. And but I hope people appreciate it. I enjoy it if it wasn't so much work, but I hope everyone else enjoys it as well. So.
Well, we're enjoying it right now. What about you're being a performance artist? Did that come after all this? After you started publishing, etc., your own press?
I did the press, but I wasn't reading in places. The first place I'd ever read was Yammer with Lisa Heminger. Like 95, I think, or something. And I would get to perform stuff, but just by reading.